Men can't resist women who walk away first. The most painful goodbye wasn't the one with tears. It was the one where she said nothing at all, no screams, no slammed doors, just silence. She didn't leave like a storm. She left like the last ember of a fire fading. She didn't stop loving me. She just started remembering how to love herself more. And I sat there, coffee still warm, chair still rocking, trying to understand how something so quiet could feel like my whole world was breaking. I kept replaying it in my head, the mornings, the smiles, the way she used to reach for my hand without thinking. And now there was only space, only stillness, only me. If you've ever been that man, the one left holding silence where love used to live, then you already know what I'm about to say. But before I could understand why she left, I had to face a harder question. What kind of love was I really giving? I loved her, or at least I thought I did. Every morning, I made her coffee just the way she liked it. 2 sugars, no cream. I'd watch her stir it slowly, half awake, wrapped in that old college sweatshirt of mine. She'd hum something under her breath, then flash that sleepy smile that made my whole morning. I memorized the sound of her laugh, the way her nose crinkled when she was trying not to cry during sad movies, the way she always took forever choosing what to eat, but somehow always picked something off my plate anyway. I noticed everything because she was everything. But deep down, I wasn't showing up from love. I was showing up from fear. Fear that I wasn't enough. Fear that she'd realize she deserved better. Fear that if I stopped trying so hard, she'd stop choosing me. So I overcompensated, overgave, overfunctioned. I needed her to need me. I needed her to look at me like I mattered, because when she did, I could finally silence that voice inside, the one whispering, "You're still not good enough." Carl Jung calls that projection. I wasn't loving her. I was loving the version of her I created to reflect my own worth. She became a mirror I clung to, hoping her gaze could hold together what I hadn't built in myself. And slowly, that kind of love became a weight. Not loud, not violent, but persistent, a soft pressure, a subtle expectation, a silent burden she never asked to carry. She never said anything directly. She was too kind, too patient. But you can feel it, can't you? You can feel it when someone starts to shrink inside your love, when what was once tenderness now feels like obligation. It shows up in the way they sigh before answering, the way their body stiffens when you reach for them, the way their smile becomes polite instead of real. I wasn't trying to control her, but I was asking her, silently, to be the answer to wounds she didn't create. And eventually, even the strongest love can't survive being turned into proof of someone else's worth. And that kind of love, born from fear, not presence, it doesn't just disappear in one day. It fades quietly, almost like fog lifting from the ground, and you only notice when everything feels colder. She didn't leave all at once. No dramatic exit, no suitcase by the door, just little things. She stopped singing while folding laundry, stopped leaning into my chest during movies. Her laughter, once full, unfiltered, turned into small, polite sounds. At first I told myself she was just tired, stressed, busy. But deep down, I knew. She was slipping, not away from me, but away from the version of herself she'd become in our relationship. One night, we were brushing our teeth, side by side like always, and she looked at me in the mirror and said, "I don't feel myself in this anymore." She didn't say she stopped loving me. She said she couldn't find herself in the space between us, and I finally saw it. I had made her a part of my identity, but in doing so, I'd slowly erased her own. It wasn't on purpose. I thought I was being devoted. I thought I was giving everything, but in my need to be loved, I stopped seeing her clearly, stopped making room for her own becoming. We start out dancing together, 2 people, 2 rhythms, but over time, we want the other person to move just like us, to match our steps, to follow our lead. but she was tired of dancing to my rhythm. She wanted her own music back, and the worst part, she tried to tell me long before that night, with her silence, her distant eyes, her shift in energy, but I didn't listen. I thought love meant trying harder, buying flowers, planning dates, saying I love you more often. What she really needed was space, space to breathe, to not be responsible for how I felt about myself. Carl Jung calls it the individuation process. It's when a person starts shedding the masks they wore to survive and finally starts living from who they really are. She wasn't rejecting me, she was returning to herself. And the truth is, I had no self to return to. That's when it hit me. I didn't lose her because I didn't love her. I lost her because I abandoned myself while trying to keep her. She wanted to be with a man who had his own center, his own peace, his own self-respect. Not one who handed her his soul and said, "Please hold this for me." After she left, I didn't know what to do with the silence she left behind. But in that silence, something unexpected happened. I began hearing me. There are two ways a man can love. The first, I need you, so I can feel like I matter. The second, I know who I am, and I invite you to walk beside me. It took me nearly losing myself to understand the difference. After she left, I went through all the motions, self-help books, therapy, silent mornings with untouched coffee. I'd sit at the kitchen table staring at her old mug, and I realized I hadn't just lost her, I had lost me long before she walked out that door. That's what scared me most. Not the loneliness, but the silence inside myself. Because when a man pours all of who he is into someone else, when he builds his entire sense of worth on whether she smiles or stays or chooses him again and again, he forgets how to stand alone. And women, they can sense that. She didn't want to carry the weight of my identity. She didn't want to be my savior, my mirror, my reason to breathe. She wanted a partner, not a patient. She wanted someone who could look her in the eye and say, "I know who I am. With or without you, I stand." But back then, I didn't know how to be that man. I thought more effort would fix it, more flowers, more reassurance, more "I'm sorry." But healing didn't come from her coming back. It came from me. Coming back to myself. Jung once wrote, "A man who has found himself doesn't need to chase, he invites." That hit me hard. All my life, I chased love, chased women, chased validation. But invitation, that's something entirely different. An invitation says, "I am whole. I've done the work. I'm not afraid to be alone." And when a man lives from that place, he stops begging, he stops controlling, he stops shaping himself into whatever version he thinks will be loved. He just is. Present, grounded, still. And in that stillness, some women will stay, others will leave. But the man, he remains because he no longer loves to be chosen. He loves because he chooses to, with intention, with clarity, from a place that doesn't need anything in return. That's the shift, from need to presence, from fear to freedom. And if any of this feels familiar, if it echoes something in your own story, I want to say something to you directly. So I want to ask you something, man to man. Have you ever been there? Have you ever poured yourself into someone, given the best years of your life, the deepest parts of your heart, only to wake up one morning and realize she was already gone? Not physically, not yet, but emotionally, spiritually. She had already started walking away long before her feet ever moved. Maybe you're living that moment right now. Maybe you're still wondering what you did wrong, still scrolling through old texts, listening to songs that don't hit the same anymore. And if that's you, I want you to know you're not crazy, you're not broken, you're not alone. Tell me below, not because you need to explain anything, but because sometimes healing begins with being heard. Drop a comment, say, "I've been there," say, "That Was me. Say whatever feels real. Let's talk like men who've walked through the fire, not to complain, but to understand, because the truth is, sometimes the most powerful thing a man can do is share his story. Maybe you're still holding on, maybe you're still hurting, but I want to leave you with this. She left, and for a long time, I took that to mean I had failed to be enough, failed to keep her, failed to hold together something I thought was unbreakable, but now I see it differently. She didn't leave because I was too much. She left because I asked her to carry something that wasn't hers. She became my mirror, and I forgot how to see myself without her reflection. Every smile I gave her had a silent question behind it. Am I good enough now? And when a man turns love into a question, sooner or later the woman runs out of answers. In her leaving, she gave me something I'd never given myself. Permission, the invitation to come home, not to her, but to me. And that's where the real journey began. Because for the first time in my life, I stopped performing, stopped chasing, stopped searching for myself in someone else's eyes. I sat with the silence, with the ache, with the questions no one could answer for me. And slowly, from the ashes of that quiet, I began to rebuild, not the man she wanted me to be, not the man I thought I had to become to be loved, but the man I was always meant to be, before I started twisting myself into shapes to earn affection. Now, I no longer love to be chosen. Choose how I love and who I become in that love, because real love, true, grounded, grown man love, doesn't beg, doesn't plead, doesn't shrink. It stands, it breathes, it invites, it doesn't demand to be seen. It simply exists so deeply. You can't help but feel it. So if you're standing right now in the ashes of something you thought would last forever, if you're holding a memory that still stings when you breathe, take one more breath. You are not broken. You are becoming. Let this be the chapter where you stop chasing approval and start claiming presence. Let this be the year you stop asking to be chosen and start choosing yourself. Because the kind of man who knows who he is, who loves without losing himself, is the kind of man no woman walks away from easily, but even if she does, he remains whole.